Bonga has published extensively in high-ranked academic journals in the field of economics and finance. He also consults with different national and international institutions, such as the International Labour Organization, banking institutions, national, provincial, and local government in South Africa. So without wasting more time, Prof, I want to welcome you and thank you for accepting the offer to address us on this very, very important topic. The floor is yours. Welcome, Prof. Thank you. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kambale, for the opportunity given to me to have a talk on this topic. I believe it's a very important topic, not only for ECSECC, but for the academic fraternity. This is a very important topic we need to discuss. Anyway, I will stay within the perimeter of the topic that I will present, but the most important thing is that we'll open the floor for questions, and that is where maybe I will try to emphasize more, maybe things that I will not be talking about, but maybe you would like to inquire. You are welcome to pose and ask any question. So actually, I was delighted really to, like I said, to present this topic because I know there are many discussions, people talking about how maybe research in academic field, sometimes they are not talking to the research in the industries, in the government, or in general, they are not linking to what policymakers want or need. And it has become a routine people to just think that, look, this is too academic. Although people are doing research in the industry, but once they have some outcome of research that are done by academic, they find that is too technical, or maybe it's not relevant to what they need. But before we start everything, we need to understand that research in general, without making that distinction between the academic or non-academic sectors, research in general is very, very important. We know, because I'm an economist anyway, they will tell you that research and development have contributed to the gross domestic product or economic growth of many countries. And for those who have done a bit of economics, they will know that in your production function, not only you will have what we call the input, that will be your capital and labor, but there is one that we call technological progress. Technological progress is just a contribution of innovation. And you cannot have innovation without proper research, without proper development. So that tells us that, look, you are in academic field, you're in non-academic field, you're in industry or any other sector, you need to do research. Because especially those who are in industry, research is very important, because if you want to stay competitive in the market, you have to innovate product. If you want to innovate product, you need to find out, you need to be outside the mass. That means that you need to find new ways, new processes, so that you can become competitive. And those processes can only be the result of research. In the government sector, any policy making that is suggested without proper inquiry Instead of talking about research, I prefer to call it inquiry. Your policy will never be relevant. So then it becomes very important in a way to think about how to put into place research in any institution. I understand in academia, any staff that is in a tertiary institution is called to do research. But in the industry, in a technical sector, maybe the government where you are, you dedicate your research to a specific division. I mean, that is fine because not everyone is called to embark in such activities, but is becoming very, very important. And I was telling to a number of people that, look, all industrial revolutions that we know, because remember we are talking about the 4th industrial revolution now, but all industrial revolutions have been the fruit of diligent and pronounced inquiry. As I said, I prefer to use the 2 concepts: innovation, research, or inquiry or research. I hope you know about, I mean, once we talk about the 4th industrial revolution, we know about the blockchain and the digital currency that everyone is talking about now. But people will tell you that there is a guy from computer science called Satoshi Nakamoto. Using all the knowledge of computer science, he is the one who introduced the Bitcoin, the idea of Bitcoin, the digital currency. And he introduced that in a way that he wanted to create a system of a decentralized banking. That means decentralized payment. That means payment, instead of going through a centralized banking system, everyone can do that. But to do that, one needs to have a knowledge of computer science in a way that they needed some empirical and quantitative skills in trying to decode what you call the nodes in the blockchain. But now it's using in public. But one needed an empirical or a specific quantitative knowledge to be able to come to such innovation. I think the question that we're interested today, that why you are here, is that our research conducted by academic institution, should that be different, or is it different to those conducted in non-academic institutions? Let me tell you, the answer is not one. The answer is multifold. First of all, it depends on the objectives of research. There is no difference, let me tell you, in terms of objectives, between the research done by academic institution and non-academic institution. Why? Be it academic or non-academic, any research activity that is undertaken should be able to answer a specific question needed by the society. There must not be, or there should not be, any research in isolation. Like I said earlier, as an academic, if I want to do a research related, I don't know, to monetary or fiscal policy, because I'm an economist, at the end, I must think about what are the policy implications? What are the recommendations? That is the same for anyone in the government. For instance, if you're in a research team, you need to inform. I mean, your research should be a source of information for the government. The same academic cannot do any research in isolation without providing proper information for policymakers. That is why, let me tell you, in academic, there are different type of journals where we publish the outcome of our research. There are those that we classify as A journals, and there are those who are just like general. Unfortunately, nowadays there are those we call predatory journals. That means that journal will just look for money and ask you for the page fees and without. But fortunately for us in South Africa here, the government tried to monitor all those journals, and they are out of the list of what we call accredited journals. But A journalist, B journalist, even a C journal will not accept any publication, although you will use all your technical ability or whatever. If there is no policy recommendation, they will never accept that. So that means that in terms of objectives, be it academic or non-academic, your research should be relevant for the society either by providing some policy implication or recommendation that are needed that can be applied by the society, or even in the technical sector. Your contribution as a researcher should be to inform on a possible innovation or any technical changes that you can provide. And that becomes very important. So in terms of objectives, be it in academic or non-academic, the objective should be the same. So that discussion should not be, this is an academic or this is a non-academic. No, no way. But secondly, the difference or the similarity between the academic and non-academic is that because this is an inquiry, and once we talk about an inquiry, it starts with an observation. That is a research. You cannot do research if you don't observe the phenomenon. Yes, by observing the phenomenon, you have to analyze it. And after that, such an analysis, you should provide the findings. And for that also, there's no difference between academic and non-academic. The way you should observe in academic, why should that be different? The way you should observe in a non-academic field, or what one can call non-academic. The way you should analyze. An example that I always give to students. For those who did economics, they know what we call an absolute income hypothesis. It's a theory that was provided by Keynes. Keynes wanted to find, because in that theory, is how your consumption is linked to your income. Because remember, others, out of the income, they can consume everything. And they can't do any saving. But others, out of the income, they can still consume and save. But Keynes wanted to know what is the marginal propensity of people either to save or to consume. And to arrive to that point, he needed to collect data on consumption. And he needed to collect data on the income. And use a linear model to find what people call a marginal propensity to consume. And he could not arrive to that conclusion without doing the activity of collecting data and analyzing them by using a simple linear model, which could inform about, look, with this person, the all income, he will use it to consume. Therefore, his marginal propensity to consume will be 1. And you can only discover that through an empirical or a quantitative evidence. You are in the government sector, you want to know what is the marginal propensity to consume of people of a certain area. Because maybe you want to inform the government that, look, maybe at this point we have to reduce taxes because the taxes is really causing problem to people not to be able to save. Therefore, maybe by reducing taxes by 2%, it may give the ability for people to start consuming more. But how do you arrive to that conclusion if you don't do the exercises that consist in collecting the data and analyze them by using a model? There is no difference in that process, be it in academic or non-academic. But the most important point when we are talking about that issue is that there are scientific principles, there are scientific norms one need to follow if you want to provide specific findings. That is why you will notice that most of the research that are done by many institutions, people will say those findings are not reliable. Why? Because they did not follow the norms that are required from collecting the data, from selecting the sample, and from applying a proper model. A proper model does not have a specific location. Once I talk about location by saying, look, this is for academic, non-academic, no. If in your specific problem, the need is to use a linear model, and by using a model that is different, and you want to provide a result by a model that are not relevant to the specific principle, your finding will never be reliable. Because for those who are in economics, they know people use what you call the dynamic panel data. The model that was suggested by Bond and Awelano, for instance. They noticed that by using that model, remember, I'm talking here about a scientific norms and principles. You want to use the econometrics, there are norms and principles you need to follow, be it in academic or non-academic. Those are the norm principles that using, for instance, a dynamic panel, by using a dynamic model, it may create a problem of endogeneity. And to solve that problem of endogeneity, one need maybe to use the general method of moment. And a result that is based on the dynamic model that does not use the generalized method of moment in the panel setting will be wrong, will not be reliable. It doesn't need to be an academic or non-academic. The principle is still the same. So that is another principle. But where is then the difference? But it is important that the scientific norm, because we are talking about the scientific norms here. Sorry. The scientific norms and principles to apply in a research will then depend on the type of research one is doing. Sorry then. So I was saying the norm and principle depend on the type of a research that one is doing. What are the type of research that exist. There may be many, but I can classify them in three. There is what you call one, exploratory research. In exploratory research, the focus is more on discovering the idea or the insight, mainly of people. For instance, I want to know if people have the habit to take one drug compared to the other. One, we need to conduct exploratory research. And such a research is conducted mostly through questionnaire. The role of the researcher in that case is to set your questions in a way that the key research questions can easily be identified through those questions. And people will say, look, in this type of research, you need more qualitative method. Yes, it is true. Because the researcher need to set questions in a way that answers can be provided easily. But once you have the responses of those to whom you're asking questions, of your respondent, you still need to analyze them a bit. How can you know that like 50% of respondents find that using drug A may be beneficial? I mean, you do what you call a very simple statistical or descriptive analysis. Even that, you still need a bit of quantitative method. That is a mistake of many people who think that, look, a qualitative method, yes, because data are collected in terms of words, maybe one cannot or is not important to apply some quantitative, but you still need to analyze them. The treatment of the data that you collect, one way or another, you may use some quantitative analysis to find out what is the tendency. So I was talking about the first type of research. The second one is what you call a descriptive research. A descriptive research goes further than the exploratory research because it aims really by an advanced treatment of what or the data that you receive from collecting information from the respondent. Because you may not even limit only to type of a simple statistical analysis, but you can go further than that. Because one knows, for instance, in South Africa, we have what you call the needs data. The National Income Dynamic Survey, the data that was collected, people are using different quantitative methods from those informations that we receive. Others were numerical. I mean, some were numerical, others were just non-numerical data, but still quantitative method was needed or still needed to analyze some of the findings within those surveys. The third, which is a very important one, is what we call a causal research. Most of the research are causal, especially most of the research done by government are causal. Because in a causal research, you need to find out what is the relationship between, or what is the effect of A on B. For instance, the government, or as a government staff, you can be commissioned maybe to find out what will happen in Eastern Cape. I mean, what will happen to the poverty in Eastern Cape if the government decide to change maybe any subsidy or let's say child grant or whatever by 2%. This is a very good research topic But that's a causal research because you want to find a relationship between poverty and subsidy or rent or something like that. You will never answer that question without proper empirical and quantitative evidence. But the question will also be known, what type of evidence then you need? Or what type of method? Because remember here we're talking about an approach, a systematic method that one need to use. You will never be able to answer that question if you don't use proper empirical analysis. But also, you need to know what type of the empirical analysis you need to use. For instance, let me tell you, answering that question, that what will 2% of subsidy do to poverty? By using an econometric method, you may not find the answer. But let me tell you, by using a computable general equilibrium, for instance, what you call a CGE simulations, that will provide you a good answer. So what I wanted to say there is that while what we call a descriptive research and the causal research will use or may start using advanced empirical and quantitative evidence from which findings you can set some policy implication or recommendation to the government, there is no way you can escape the use of empirical or quantitative evidence for that. Even what we call exploratory research, where we just need to know about your opinion about the ideas of people, about maybe the trend of a product or whatever, the data collected still need to be treated, still need to be analyzed. So it becomes important now to understand that it looks like there is a type or there is a tendency that without proper application, I prefer to say relevant application of empirical and quantitative method, findings that would lead to policy implications or recommendations may not be reliable. The only difference that one can draw between quantitative, or let us say between academic and non-academic research, is maybe on the way the research projects are presented. Because in academic here, we are formal in a way we present our research findings or the way we write our research paper. The structure is the same for all the fields. First of all, in your structure, anyway, you need to have your abstract. You need to have your introduction. You need to have your literature review. You need to have your methodology, and you need to analyze, estimate, and discuss your results for policy recommendation, like I said. But in academic, what is more important is that once you write your introduction, you must first, or let me put it differently, you cannot do if you want to publish in a very good journal in academic, you cannot write something that doesn't bring a contribution to the existing literature. While in non-academic, you can just apply an existing principle. Like I gave you an example, you want to see if a 2% increase in subsidy in the Eastern Cape, but how much would that reduce the poverty? There is no, it's more as an application than a contribution anyway. I mean, depending on the semantic anyway. But on the academic field, you want just to say, look, people who try to analyze the effect of the increase of 2% subsidy on poverty, they've used maybe a CGE model. But I want to show you that, look, that same principle, instead of using just a CGE model, yes, I can still use a CGE, but maybe my elasticity, I can find it differently. You see, that's a contribution. That is what actually is strict, or that what I can say, it can make a difference between the academic and non-academic. Dr. Campbell, I need to mind about the time then. I noticed that you say this thing goes to 1 o'clock, and I need really people to ask questions. I prefer to stop in 2 minutes time now. So, if I have to summarize, the debate of academic and non-academic research, for me, as long as the approach to follow from the research questions should conform to some scientific norms and principles. There is one cannot differentiate a norm or principle for academic or norm or principle for non-academic. That is wrong. If you need to apply proper empirical and quantitative evidences so that your findings may become relevant, you have to do that. So that is why sometimes we, because we are in economics department here, we are known for econometrics because we want to teach students as many techniques as possible so that they can analyze and see what is the problem. And within such a problem, what are the norms and principles, scientific norms and principles, and those principles, what type of method one need to use so that you can provide a proper finding, which finding can be used for policy implications. So we say that given the type of research that exists, it looks like you need to make your hands dirty somewhere by trying to get in deep into some empirical and quantitative skills. And there is no way one can escape a proper advanced knowledge. And if you see people debating about, look, academic, maybe they don't talk to the industry. I mean, those are wrong academic. Research cannot be done in isolation. The only difference is that what are the norms, scientific norms and principles one need to follow. For instance, some of the research we are doing for our students, we are criticizing the fact that, look, the relationship between maybe capital flow and economic growth can be linear. That as long as you have more capital flow, therefore the economy will start growing. We say no, maybe according to the theory, one can think about principles or what we call a nonlinear model. That means that the relationship may depend on the type of institutions that are in the country. And if you say that it may depend on the type of institution, that means you're thinking about a certain threshold, a certain non-linearity. So that is why the use of proper empirical and quantitative evidence need to be differentiated also. One is that we encourage be it in academic or non-academic field, that people get used to the different quantitative method if they really want to conduct proper and relevant research. I think I prefer to stop here, and the floor, if Dr. Kambale can allow that, should be open for questions. I don't want to abuse your time then. I know you plenty, maybe 1 o'clock. Sorry for talking too much instead of just 20 minutes that was allocated to me like I saw here. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much, Professor Bonga-Bonga, for this wonderful insight. We come to understand that in terms of research, there should not be any difference between research done in the academic field and non-academic field. So it's all the same. That's what we take home today. Be it in the academia, the industry, in government, we come to understand that research is research and it's important. So, Prof, maybe we're going to allow people to ask questions. Maybe I'll kickstart the process. You know, what I've discovered is after working in government department for many years, over 20 years, and now trying to put my other leg in the academia, I really discover very, very quickly that there is a weak interaction between policymaker and research community. And I'm battling with this because now it's a one thing to produce good qualitative research, and most of it, like you spoke about, the how the findings are presented. You know, when you present this to the policymaker, then it's like, what is this? I don't know, when are we going to battle with this? You know, so that weak interaction between policy making and research community, it's a gap that needs to be addressed. And I don't know, otherwise the research will be hanging there in the books and it's not applied. And also, maybe how do we translate those findings into innovation in a simpler way that, you know, policymakers or non-technical people can you know, they can use and they can absorb it. So if there is any question, maybe while people are preparing for their question, maybe let's kickstart with that, Prof.
My answer is that sometimes academics, we are also to blame, because remember, between academic, we always say when you are presenting something, don't use concepts that are obvious, that everyone knows, because, I mean, you are between you. But that's not the same if you want to present something to those who are not related, maybe to what you want to do. You must find ways to do that. So that is a communication issue. I'll give you an example, for instance, that I was doing a research on trying, I mean, as a contribution, showing that your capital inflow will not necessarily lead to economic growth if the institution within that specific country are not solid. That is the first thing. Before I explain to that person that I want to use a panel smooth transition regression, because actually in that case, that's what I have to use. But I want, in a very simple way, to explain to communicate to those maybe who are not so advanced as we are, or as I am, is that I wanted to show, that's what I would tell them, that contrary to people who will think that, look, as there's a flow of capital, your economy will grow. I wanted to show that it has to go through, or it will have to depend to the type of institution that we have in the country. Therefore, because of that, instead of using a linear model, I will use a nonlinear model where I will use a threshold core institution. You see, the way I go in explaining that is that from the layman explanation to a sophisticated one. Because the information that he will go home, that, let me call it layman, is that no way one can link just capital flow directly to growth without thinking about how institution will be. And for me, on my advanced econometrics, I can do the rest. After that, finding, those scientific norms and principles that I talk that are related to a panel smooth transition regression. But can you imagine I come just look, I communicate to my, those who are supposed to take my research, look, I apply a panel smooth transition regression, show that a transition core institution will have an impact. I mean, that's threatening. So that's why sometimes they just push you because you are threatening them. Make it very simple. And that is why you see in non-academic, we have what you call non-technical. Say, communicate properly. Let me tell you, they will receive that for sure. I think that's what I think the way we communicate. You can do. I mean, because we saw that there's no way you can escape the use of proper methods, relevant method. But how do you communicate that? That is why you in an academic way. I mean, I'm communicating to the people who are speaking the same language is easier. But you're not speaking the same language. Just be careful to think about the type of language you need to use. I think that's my answer.
Thank you.
I would be happy to receive many questions. I'm here. I depend on you. Maybe you are busy, but I'm not busy.
Thank you.
Ask any question. I'm here. I'll be pleased to
I'll leave this time to the floor. Please raise your hand if you have a question, comment, clarity. And if I can't see your hand, just go ahead because we are not so many. Just raise your hand or just go on and speak if there is anyone with a question. Anyone?
In my class, what I do, I pick up students and I ask them to ask questions. And there's so many names that I see. Maybe I can pick up people and then ask them to ask questions.
Anyone with a question or comment, clarity?
Okay, good afternoon.
Yes.
Yes.
That is Clement, I can see, yeah?
Clement, yes.
Oh, Clement, how are you?
I'm right in you, Prof.
Oh, I'm so happy.
Oh, good, yeah, good. Thank you for the presentation.
I can't hear your question, Clement.
I don't know what happened. I think, okay, I'm back. I think, just.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm back. Yeah. So I wanted to find out about the interpretation side. I'm from the academic side. And sometimes you do projects for, let's say, the government side. The way you interpret your results is slightly different. Is there advice that maybe you could provide us? I know in academia, I'm sure you know about how we do so in academia, but when you make that transition to, let's say, working for the government, what advice can you give us in terms of, the interpretation?
Clement, for me, the interpretation will not be different. Maybe, like I insist, the way you communicate that interpretation is what matters. Because you see, people can also interpret. You can have finding, but maybe you interpret it wrongly. I was giving the simple example of the absolute income hypothesis. That you want to to run a regression that says C is your consumption, and remember A is your autonomous consumption, plus B multiplied by Y. B is a slope anyway, is your marginal capacity to consume. You can run that model. You find what is your A, because remember, in any econometric estimation, you need to find your parameters. You find your A and you find your B. How do you communicate or interpret A? How do you interpret B? How do you want to tell your audience that because I find A this way, that would mean this and that? For instance, in this case, what is an autonomous consumption? You need to tell him that the A that represents autonomous consumption means that a consumption that someone can have even though it doesn't have any income. And the B, it tells you, is actually what should happen if maybe you increase the income by 1 and the consumption will increase by less than 1. I mean, that's an interpretation of your model. So that's why I say the way you communicate is very important. Make it simple. Understand your audience. You will make your interpretation easy. Because there's no way you can say, look, I have the finding. The way I want to interpret it for academic should be different the way I want to interpret it for non-academic. I will be amazed if that is the case. But I will understand that when I do the interpretation, the information I should give to the academic, or let us say, the information I should give to the non-academic may be more and a bit elaborated than those I will give to the academic. Then I will understand. But your finding, the way you interpret it, to the academic and to the non-academic should not change. The way you elaborate it to the academic and non-academic may be different. You understand, Clement? Unless, first of all, the findings are not clear.
And Prof, how do you then translate that into policy? Because I think that is now you do that whether it's a linear regression, then you come up with a finding, and then how do you provide a policy recommendation out of that one coefficient? Start creating a headline, in a newspaper and requesting policy to be amended because of that one coefficient. How do you translate that and make it a headline, Prof?
I can use many examples that we use during this presentation. Let me go to the example where on the causal research. You want to find out what percentage needed to be increased, percentage for subsidies, and the implication that we have on poverty. And then you use your CG model, you have your social accounting metrics that you have there, you run your model by following proper norms and principles of CG. Then you find that actually 20% increase in subsidy will reduce poverty in Eastern Cape by 2%. That's your finding. And then present it to the government. Again, elaborate. Again, communicate that in the Eastern Cape, the only way we can reduce poverty by 2% is that subsidy should be increased by 20%. Therefore, we urge the government to relocate maybe subsidy from maybe old ages, I mean, if that is what you found, to child grant, because as you put in the old age, poverty is more sensitive rather than putting it in the child grant. You did a very good CGE model with a very reliable sum, and you discover that communicate, this is a policy. This is already a policy recommendation. Shift your subsidies from old ages to child grant. But why did you say that? Because my sophisticated CGE simulation model has found so. And I don't think that they will reject your finding, because remember, I was talking about the reliability of findings. What are the norms and scientific principles that are used for you to come to that point? And many people fall short of that. I mean, we see before maybe the elections, people will do surveys and they found that no, this one will increase by 20%, therefore they will vote for this party. But then you ask them, give me the data. How did you do even your sample selection? You notice that the sample selection was even wrongly done. Those are the things that we're talking about, norms and principles, scientific. You need to be followed and communicate and elaborate. That is what is needed, Kambale. You have your findings. The only maybe resistance you will have with policymakers would then be on the way you are presenting, you are elaborating that. Don't give him all your social accounting metrics and all your equation of a CGE and showing, I mean, that you're threatening him. You will keep it for you. For instance, for me, if I come and see, I want to check really if this funding are relevant, then I'll go line by line, all the equations that you use, how many households were there, and I mean, that's the technical aspect of it. But the way you communicate is very important. That's what I'm insisting. Sometimes we find resistance and rejection just the way you communicate. Like I was telling to Clement, the interpretation is the same, but maybe you needed to elaborate more on the non-academic than the academic one. But we found today that, look, nothing should be different. I mean, the objective should be the same. 2, the methodology to follow or the principle and norm to use should be the same. Otherwise, I mean, you are lying to me, Isaac. Because remember, for instance, if you do your basics econometrics, they will tell you that in the OLS, your regressors should not be linked to the error terms. But those are the norms, scientific norms and principles when you want to run that linear model. But if you go against that, that is wrong. Guys, let me just take maybe other questions instead of elaborating more on that. I think it's clear. I really wish there are more questions and we put more discussion, because you see, but they say professors, they like talking. If you make a professor not to talk, a professor become very uncomfortable.
Any question? The floor is yours. Any question? Please go ahead, if anyone. Well, if there's no question, oh yeah, Dr. Izu, please go ahead. Izu, you are muted.
Yeah.
Yeah,
thank
go
you,
ahead.
Prof. Thank you for the presentation, and I really enjoyed the insight that you brought to this discussion. And Dr. Campbell, thanks you a lot for inviting me to this particular presentation. Sorry, I just have a kind of let me say, I wouldn't say it's really a question. It's just to seek a view. Because sometimes when we present papers to these government officials and what they tend to the way they tend to view those presentation or the result is that we already know about it. Something like assuming that you're looking at effects of skills on employability of workers. And when you say that, okay, the higher the skill, the higher the chances of being employed. Most times these people, because you presented the whole facts and these are your findings, they say to you, we already know that. Tell us what we don't know already. So in such a situation, what do you think? How do you think you can approach this better?
Yeah, that's a very very good question or concern, like you say that. You see, that is why in academic, we always think about contribution when you present, because maybe it's not their fault. I mean, if they know that, what can you tell them?
Yeah.
If they know that, what can you tell them? That is why now is the role of a researcher to consult literature. Because like I was telling you in academic, for instance, once I want to do my research, I have 3 steps. I mean, in the introduction, 3 to 4 steps. I always first ask a question. What is the background of this study? It's about the relationship between a grant and the poverty. Then the second question I will ask myself, what has been done in that field? But by saying what has been done in that field, I also ask myself a question. What are the findings that are there in the relationship between those 2 variables, poverty and the subsidy? And the third question, that's the most important thing. What is the gap? You see, doctor, as long as you identify the gap, no one will tell you that we know about it. Because the gap just means that, look, people have done it, but there's still room for improvement, or there are still things to be done. And the fourth question will always be, when you identify the gap, how to fill it. Because you may come by using a CG model, for instance, that study that have been done, they just show how increasing the old age subsidy may affect poverty. But you want to show how, assuming the allocation is the same, because you don't want the government to go look for money, they will tell you they don't have, there is austerity. But how, maybe by shifting some allocation from one group to the other, which effect that will have, maybe on poverty. And because you're a researcher, you know that, look, studies that are there, they only say, we increase this, then we found this. But they did not analyze the allocation or reallocation within groups. If you don't want them to get bored, that is my answer, the summary of my answer, is that identify properly the gap before you conduct a research. Otherwise, they will tell you that what you are doing is like you are doing a review of literature. You are telling us what exists. Next time, go further, doctor, find out the gap. You see, that is why in academia, that is journalists, very good journalists, that's what they want. Otherwise, you are doing a simple application and they get bored. Don't mind, it's not just about the non-academic, it's everywhere. As long as you as a researcher, you are unable to identify a gap, you make other people to be bored. Let me just stop there to take other questions possibility. Please, guys, later give general questions. There's no bad, good questions. It's just a discussion that we need to have.
Yeah, I think people will know the direction of the relationship. And because they know the direction of the relationship, they will say, this we already know. But yeah, they don't know by how much. Like here, the example you gave is that a 20% increase in grant will contribute to 2% reduction in poverty, but they will not know that 2%. Yet they will claim to know, to say we know already that. They know the direction, but they don't know by how much. I think that's what I will also
yeah, that is why coming back to that, Dr. Kambale, is what I'm talking about. The way you present, the way you elaborate is very important. Tell them what is the gap in your gap is that, yes, people know that poverty increasing it will also, subsidy increasing it will also reduce poverty. But what is the proportion? And what is the role of fiscals in that? If you put it like that, then we'll be interested. Oh, yeah, we thought that it's just a 50-50 thing. No, but maybe 50 can lead to 2 or 20 can lead to 2. You see, then that's a gap. Once you present, guys, let me tell you, that's what I always say. There is, don't make a difference when you want to do something that is academic or non-academic, especially you who are academic who are working in the non-academic fields. Present it as though it was an academic, but the information, the way you elaborate the way you interpret, like I was talking to Clement, is that the most important thing. Because if you want to reduce it, they'll be bored. Maybe that is the fight you always have there. As long as you yourself as a researcher, you don't consult properly literature to differentiate between what exists and the gap, you will make your audience to be bored. Because that's normal. What you are doing there is that you did not identify a proper gap, but you want to present a research. Your research will be a common one. That is why we see in academia, we insist, very good journal, they will even tell you. They give you the same answer, Dr. Anikwa. They will say, look, what is new that you are doing? Because in your introduction, yes, you give us the context of your study. Yes, you give us what has been done. But unfortunately, you did not tell us what is the gap. And that's where the fight starts. That's where the fight starts. Let me just have any other question, depending on your time. Me, I have my time. I don't know, Dr. Kambale, maybe your staff will go back to work. I don't know. I have my time. I enjoy the discussion anyway.
It's very interesting. Any question from the floor? Prof, if there is no other question, let me take this opportunity to really thank you for this exciting, wonderful presentation. I believe that we are now enlightened. We know what to do. We take home your suggestion. I come to understand again that in research, there's no difference between the academic field and the non-academic field. So it is the same whether you are in the industry, in government, in the academia, it's all the same. It's a matter of how we present our input. Thank you so much for that. We hope to remain in touch with you. If there are further questions, please do not hesitate to assist us. And on the chat, if I receive further questions, I will not hesitate to bring them to you. I think even this webinar today is contributing to the development of our province, because through this we hope that we will continue to do what is right and advance our economy. Thank you so much, and to all our audience, thank you for taking your time to listen to us and to Prof. Bonga-Bonga. We're going to have another webinar on Wednesday. I myself will be unpacking the benchmark exercise and the rebasing of the GDP on Wednesday at 9 o'clock. So those who are also interested to know more about how the benchmark was done by State SA and the implication of that on the Eastern Cape, you're welcome to join on Wednesday at 9 o'clock. I think it will also be interesting. So thank you, Prof. Let's call it a day. Will not hesitate to contact you again. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for me. Thank you. I hope I will see you in the future then. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Dr. Kambele. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Bye.